The Philadelphia Eagles are Super Bowl champions. Eagles fans everywhere, this is for you. Let the celebration begin.
Hey everyone, welcome to another Eagle Eye with Reuben Frank. I'm Dave Zangaro. Rube, how you doing?
I'm doing well. It's a beautiful day out. Spring is kind of in the air. Big Sixers win to go into the All-Star break over the number one seed in the West. So everything's good. Taking my parents to get their vaccine today.
That's exciting. That's certainly cool. Yeah, my parents are in that process too. So, yeah, let's get it done. The Sixers game was crazy. By the way, I thought they were going to lose that game for sure until, the end and overtime.
To me, the biggest difference between, and I was never a Brett Brown hater. I thought he had limitations, but they didn't always finish. And how many times did they have like an 11-point lead in the fourth quarter and then it was 7 and then it was 5 and you're looking at the clock and then it was 3 and they lose. This team finishes for the most part. They finish strong. And it drives you crazy sometimes when Ben and Bede are on the bench, but it pays off at the end of games. And Tobias, man, that dude is so underrated. He outscored the Jazz 11-5 in overtime.
He was great in overtime.
He was amazing. So I don't know what I'm going to do 8 days without a Sixers game. I'm going to go nuts. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to have to watch the Flyers. But
we have spring training too.
Yeah, but those games are all during the day.
I like that.
Yeah, I don't mind a day baseball game. I love day baseball. Like I have the baseball package just so I can have a game on during the day.
Yeah. Like
when I'm working, have something to watch, relax. But at night, I like to settle in and watch a Sixers game. We got to go a week without it. I mean, we went like 8 months without it. So.
Yeah, I think you'll be okay. You were watching Korean baseball a year ago, so I think you'll make it through.
I was, and then ESPN2 stopped televising him. I was like, what am I going to do? And I started watching Premier League soccer just because it was the only thing on. And I got hooked to Premier League soccer. So
that's not a bad thing. That's something you can carry with you.
I'm learning a lot about it. It's interesting.
Yeah.
There's a lot I don't understand, but yeah.
All right, I'm going to stop you from talking about Premier League, and we have a bunch to talk about today.
Just one question, though.
Yeah.
I don't understand how Americans become rabid fans of a certain Premier League team. Like if you live in Philly, you're an Eagles fan. If you live in Dallas, you're a Cowboys fan. Or if you live in Philly, but how do you get to be such a rabid fan of a Premier League team if you live in Delco or Collingswood or?
You pick one and you go with it.
But what do you base that on? Like, I can't just do that. I don't root for any team. I don't how about the one team, Schalke? They've had 5 coaches this year. They're not Premier League. They're in, what are they in the Bundesliga? They fired 4 coaches. They're on their 5th coach and they still have 20 games left. They go through a couple more coaches. I love that stuff. Anyway, I'll shut up. I'm getting that look from Dave like, shut the up. Okay.
Yeah, we have a bunch to talk about that's not Bundes-related content.
5 coaches.
We want to talk about some restructures possibly coming, one reportedly on the way. We have our preseason 2020 predictions to get into, which I don't imagine will be pretty.
We were close. We were really close, but it was such an unpredictable season that some of these guesses are hysterical looking back.
Yeah, I bet. And I want to say that it probably doesn't bode well for me that you want to go over this. I don't think that's going to be good news for me later, but we'll find out. We also want to get into a little bit about some free agency. Alex Smith is now on the market. Would he make some sense? Chris Sims, who we had in the last podcast, released his quarterback rankings for the draft. We'll talk about those. Always a lightning rod topic. But let's start with Brandon Graham. Our old buddy Derek Gunn reported that the Eagles and Graham are working to restructure his deal. I don't think it's a surprise. I mean, he's right now his cap hit for this year is about $18 million. And Brandon Graham's still a really good player.
Yeah, and it makes sense. He's also 33, and
he's 32.
He's 32. He'll be 33, I think, when next season opens.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I just say that because he's like 10 days older than me, and I'm not ready to say I'm 33 yet. So I know he's not either.
I was doing a story during the 2018 season about how many guys who were over 30 were having great years. And I asked Malcolm about it, and he had just turned 30, and he's like, how long were you just like waiting until I turned 30? He was like 10 days after his birthday. He's like I can't even enjoy, like, I can't even like still think I'm in my 20s. Like, you got to come up to me with this. But anyway, I like it. I think it makes a lot of sense. He's a guy that, he's one of those iconic Eagles that you think twice before you cut him if you have to do it for cap purposes. But they wouldn't save any money by doing that this year. So a lot of things, he's their best pass rusher. He's a legend in this city. Made one of the two biggest defensive plays in history, in Eagles history, along with Chuck Bednarik, right? That's the company he's in. Chuck Bednarik and Franklin.
It's Brandon Graham, Chuck Bednarik, and Patrick Robinson.
Rob, and 50-yard pick six. That would be up there, man. That would be a good list. The top 10 defensive plays in Eagles history.
Sounds like something to get on.
Eric Allen's 94-yard pick six off Boomer. But anyway, see, now I'm going to be thinking of that while we talk. But it does make sense from a financial perspective, from a football perspective, and just from you don't want to cut every single older guy. You want to have some thread when it makes sense, and there's no reason to cut him because of the cap or other reasons. But it does make you think. We're in this position where our best players are our older players, and it's not an ideal position. If Derek Barnett had been a 15-sack guy, like you would expect a 14th pick to be, 12 to 15 sack guy, I don't know if they're doing this. I don't know if you're thinking about, let's keep Brandon Graham around a couple more years, or what can we do to keep him. So, but I mean, he still plays at a high level. He's a great locker room guy, and I think it's big to have a bridge from an old coach to a new coach. BG is going to be, as much as he liked the old coaching staff, he's going to be so behind this new coach, and I think he's one of those guys that if you're Nick Sirianni, you target Fletcher and BG and Kelsey if he's here, and you win over those guys, and then the rest of the locker room will follow them. So I think there's value in having Brandon Graham here. Plus, he's one of my favorite guys, not going to lie. So
he's one of everyone's favorite guys, but he's a good player still. That's the thing. We haven't even seen a gradual decline from him. If anything, he's gotten a little better. I mean, you can argue, I know he finally got the Pro Bowl nod. I don't know if this was his best year, but you can argue that 2020 was his best season. So I think there's also, with some guys by now you're starting to see the decline and you're hoping they can just like keep it together a little bit longer. But with him, look, we never know when it's going to happen. It happens to everyone at some point, but there's no real reason to think that he's going to like fall off a cliff next year.
Doesn't happen to everybody. Some guys retire before. Tiki Barber, Jim Brown. Mm-hmm. But I think one thing that helps BG, two things that help BG, he didn't play that much early in his career. Mm-hmm. And I think he's getting some dividends from that now because he's played a lot of snaps, and I think he's only missed one game like since he became a full-time starter. But I think that helped him. I think that he's got but he really takes care of himself. He's really learned, and he says every off season he learns like one more way to take better care of himself. And he's made it a year-round thing, and he's just found ways to take care of his body, and he's not a guy that has any bad habits that we know of, and he takes care of himself. So I think those two things have really gone a long way to helping him be effective. And he's been used well. His snap counts were down a little bit this year, although there are games that he played a lot of snaps. But the best thing for BG would be for a second guy to establish himself as that kind of 8 to 12 sack guy, which he hasn't really had lately. So, that would really help take some pressure off him because, each year, I mean, I would think he would play a little bit less at this point in his career.
You would think so. I mean, it also has helped him a little bit that he's been playing on the left side the last 5 years. So he's been going against right tackles, where a guy like Derek Barnett has been going against left tackles. And I think that's generally it's funny because in this city we think about lane on the right side, but there aren't a lot of lanes out there as right tackles. You normally, it's still pretty traditional to have your better tackle on the left side. So I think that's helped BG.
Yeah, probably a little bit. I just think he's really smart, and he's really he's really changed the way he approaches the off season. He'd rather just sit at home with his daughter and hang out and play games. And not that anyone's going out really right now, but that's just who he is. He's just a low key guy. And he just loves playing ball. I mean, he's such a great story because of the way his career started. And he really was. And he still uses that, how he was counted out, how he was labeled a bust. He still uses that 10 years later. And, how he's treated by Washburn, who he said they reconciled. And that's interesting. Washburn's son's now with the Eagles, which is also really interesting.
And coaches defensive line a lot.
Yeah. And coaches the D-line, kind of a hybrid scouting coaching position. BG's had a lot of position coaches too. Yeah. He's had like 7 of them over the years. So, all-time Eagle and a great story and a great guy. And I'm glad he's going to be around.
Yeah, and it makes sense too. They have 2 ways to go about this. They can either restructure and basically say, hey, we want you here this year, and then they'd have to swallow a pretty big dead money hit next year, or you extend him and you keep him around, and it's more palatable from a cap sense, and you get the player, and you still want the player. So to me, this is a no-brainer, and I'd expect they get it done based on he wants to be here too. He just talked to Zach Berman from The Athletic and said, yeah, like I don't want to go anywhere else. I want to play here, and it will be cool to see him in his career here. It's rare. I mean, the last guy who really played his whole career here and had a good career was Brent Selleck, and I think if there was interest in Selleck beyond the Super Bowl, he probably would have played elsewhere.
And it's
tough to do.
Who's the last Pro Bowl player to retire as an Eagle after not playing for another team?
I don't know.
Because I think it was Mike Quick. I think you have to go back that far.
Oh, I thought you had the answer for me.
Oh, it's Mike Quick. And, Jerome Brown only played for the Eagles, but he didn't really, he didn't retire. I mean, he died.
Yeah, we didn't get to the –
Yeah, but as far as playing his career and then never at the end of your career playing for another team. Wes Hopkins was a Pro Bowler and spent 1 week in training camp with the Chiefs. And then they cut him and the Eagles signed him again. But he played in a preseason game, so I don't count him. But I think it's Mike Quick, unless I'm missing somebody. And that was a long time ago. I think his last year here was 90. So that's 30 years ago. Every single Pro Bowl player finishes somewhere else. And most of them, we were talking to Lito about this on the WIP pregame show 2 years ago. He finished with the Jets in the year with the Vikings. And he told us some funny stories about Brett Favre. He said he wishes he just ended his career here, took whatever they offered him. He said it's never the same, when you spend most of your career with one team. And all those guys, Trey Thomas and Corey Simon and Donovan, and you go right down the line. None of them ever does anything in their second or in their last, with their last team. Not maybe Carson will, but
Carson's also different, I think, for a lot of reasons, but
younger, but not that much younger. Most of these guys were here till they were like 30. And Joe Banner got a lot of grief for letting guys go at that age. And Brian Mitchell, none of these guys ever did anything with their next team. So something to keep in mind. I think sometimes the grass is always greener, no doubt.
Yeah, and it's not like that's something you're right about the lack of success these guys have had, but it's not rare in the NFL at all for guys to finish on other teams. It's more common than any. Like now, it happens all the time. You have these great players. I remember when I was in Houston and we had Ed Reed there for 6 games, and it was like, man, why is Ed Reed here? This is not going well, and he should it's weird to see someone like a great player like that just not have it anymore and not feel comfortable in the situation. And it happens a lot.
Yeah, you're right. And it's just weird seeing them in another uniform. Harold Carmichael finished his career with the Cowboys, played I think 1 game. And, he says he regrets that to this day. I think Ed Reed went in the Hall of Fame the same year as Doc, and his speech, he thanked every team he had been with. And, he got to Houston, and I think he went to the Jets after that and finished his career with the Jets. And he was like, I wasn't very good then, and I played terrible, but I'd like to thank the Texans and the Jets. It was pretty funny, but I think he was in camp with another team that he like for a week. But yeah, it's tough to say goodbye, because those checks keep coming in, and once you get that last check, man, you just wait until your pension kicks in, 30 years later or whenever. So it's tough, but BG is one of those guys who I think he'll know when the right time is to retire. He'll know, he's not going to go out there and embarrass himself. He's made a fortune. He's got a great legacy. I mean, he's got a Super Bowl ring. He's got a Pro Bowl. He's got a championship. He's got, I think he's fifth in Eagles history in sacks, even though he's never had more than 9.5 in a season. So
if he plays the next 2 seasons here and stays healthy, he'll be the all-time games played leader.
Is that right? Over Akers? I think Akers.
Over Akers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, nothing against Dave. Great guy, great kicker, but yeah. Yeah.
It'd be cool to see him. It'd be cool to see. It's not luck. No one really cares about that, but it'd be cool to see.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. All right. I did want to mention that so this is probably the first domino for the Eagles. Well, Carson was obviously the first one, but this is the first kind of salary cap domino they have to figure out. And there's a bunch of them. So I figured we've talked about this a bunch, but let's just go through some of the other guys who might get restructured contracts or extensions. The one we've brought up the most is Fletcher Cox. It's really the most obvious place to start because he has the biggest cap hit on the team in a post-Carson world. So of the guys who are on the roster, they can.
Still has the biggest.
Yeah, I know. But of the guys on the roster, Fletcher does. And, he's another guy who's still really effective. And I don't think you can extend everyone and keep all your old players, but I'd keep him around for a couple more years too.
Yeah. And I think, when you do a rebuild and you go young, you have to be smart about it too. They don't have replacements for these guys either. They don't have a replacement for Fletcher Cox. So as long as he's your best D tackle and he's a Pro Bowler and he's playing at that level, maybe not the same level he was at a few years ago, but he's still really good. Well, he finished really strong this year, and he was playing really well. So
and he still has some dominant moments. Just
he does
dominant.
Not as many, not as many, but yeah, he does. And some of these guys just those are the three to me. Kelsey is a different story because we don't know if he's going to keep playing or not. But Kelsey, BG, and Fletcher are 3 guys that are iconic Eagles, all-time great Eagles. In Fletcher and Kelsey's case, they're possible Hall of Famers, but they're all still playing really well. So for all those reasons, it makes sense to keep them.
Yeah. Another restructure that would make sense is Brandon Brooks. He has a big cap kit and honestly doesn't have a lot of leverage right now. I don't know if they'd want to use that, but he's coming off another injury. He has a high cap hit. You'd think he'd be willing to work with the team here a little bit. I don't know, but that would make sense.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It's another position where we saw last year what happens when Brandon Graham and a couple other linemen aren't in the lineup. They missed him so much. People forget just how good he is. I don't know if they forget, but I have to be reminded of it. I mean, he's the best right guard in football, I think, when he's right. I hope he is that again, because that's a terrible injury, and he's had some injuries now. He's got a history of injuries recently, so it'll be interesting. He's a really proud guy, so I'm not sure how he would react to that. I just don't know. But it's not like these guys are going broke either. But yeah, to be able to do it, if the guy's not amenable to it, you have to have that threat of, we can't keep you at this price. What's his dead money if they cut him? Do you have that in front of you?
I do. I don't think they can outright cut him because of the contract.
Yeah.
It would actually hurt them to cut him right now. And they need the relief right now. So maybe they figure out a way to give him some bonus, spread out the hit a little bit.
Yeah. And if you're a player and any player is going to want bonus instead of base salary, it's money you get earlier. You can invest it. It's working for you. Whereas if it's your base salary, you're not getting it till the fall, and that might not sound like a big deal, but these guys only get so much money in their career. They only play so many years. Nothing's guaranteed to them. And if you can get the money now, I mean, I think most people at their jobs, if your boss comes up to you and says, hey, we want to take the money we're going to pay you in October, November, December, give it to you now. You say, okay.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you?
Yeah, and that's basically, just so I want to explain this because everyone might not understand it. That's basically what we're talking about when there's a restructure, or in some cases an extension. Like basically, in the case of Brandon Graham, his base salary this year is $13 million. So in an effort to relieve your salary cap hit this year, you can say, all right, Brandon, we'll give you 11 million of that in a bonus right now, which would reduce his cap hit because it reduces base salary. And then any bonus money gets split up over the length of the contract. So if the contract is 5 years and it's a $10 million bonus, it's $2 million each year. So it's a way it is kicking the can. And I know that phrase kind of has a negative connotation, but in this climate right now with the lowered cap hit and with, like, we're seeing the end of the tunnel here. Like, we're seeing the cap coming back in a big way in 2022 and the following years. Kicking the cans, really all the Eagles can do. And they have a good situation once they get through this. So I'd expect we see a few of those type of moves.
Yeah, basically the Eagles can absorb that cap hit in future years a lot better than they can now. So even though they'll be adding to next year's cap and the year after, in some cases even the year after that, they're clearing space this year. So yeah, it makes sense. Hey, Eagles fans, it's time to look forward to a dream vacation. The Eagles fan cruise tickets are selling out quickly. The ship sails in just about a year, March of 2022, for 7 days and nights with Eagles fans and only Eagles fans. Book your tickets today at PhiladelphiaEaglesCruise.com.
All right. I've been dreading this because a few weeks ago, Rube said, hey, I have these preseason predictions we made, and I found them and I looked at them, and we should go over them. And in my head, I'm going, that doesn't sound like good news for me. That Rube went through finding them and then found them and didn't bury them. that Rube found them and said, we're going to go over them on the podcast.
Well,
all right.
Normally I lose this stuff, right? I mean, I just lose stuff. I just do. And so I put it in like 8 different places, and I slugged it like every possible, 2020 Dave Rube predictions. And I emailed it to myself. I printed it out and scotch taped it on my front door. But it's really interesting, and it really shows, I think our predictions show how much things have changed since we made them in, I guess, in September, just before the season, or late August. It's really an interesting window into how we were thinking not all that long ago, So last year we ended up tied. We each were closer on 5 of them. And this isn't like let's make a deal where you have to be closer without going over. It's just whoever's closest. Mm-hmm. So this year we did 11 categories, so we didn't have a tie. All right. The first thing we did was Miles Sanders scrimmage yards. And we're both way over. I mean, I picked 1736, and he was coming off like 1358 as a rookie. So, you figure he's gonna increase that. You picked 2050.
Yeah,
and he had 1,064 yards.
Yeah, had injuries.
His receiving yards were way down.
Yeah.
But
the whole offense was broken. Yeah,
and it was just a bad year. Doug didn't use him like he should have. Had 3 incredible runs, and that was, and not a lot else, but didn't really have a lot of opportunities. Dropped some passes. I was closer, but we were both way, way off. Number 2 is interesting. Jason Peters starts, and this was after they brought him back. I picked 13. You picked 14. He started 8. I don't know what we were thinking.
What were we thinking?
I don't know. But we were both way over again. I was closer, but we were both way off. Now, the next thing we picked was Darius Slay picks. So we're either like the biggest homers or really stupid. I picked 5. You had 3. He had 1, so you're closer. But I thought he was gonna. I thought he was gonna get a lot more opportunities, and I thought he was gonna have his ball in more hands, his hands on more balls. But it just didn't go that way. I don't think he was bad, but he wasn't great. He dropped a couple, I think. I don't think he just had that many chances. I think he was a victim of this. CB2 was in disarray all year, and people just threw that way.
Yeah, I thought he was still a good player.
He's a good player.
Good players allowed to make plays too, and he knows that. He's the first to admit it.
The next one, and this is Carson Wentz touchdown passes, Dave.
Well, I was so bullish on Carson.
Yeah, I was more bullish.
Were you? Okay.
We both basically doubled what he had. I picked 33. You had 30. He threw 16. So again, for the fourth straight category, we're both way over.
I really thought he was going to have a big year. I mean, based on those 4 games, the end of 2019, you're looking at him like, all right, like this guy, he already brought a bunch of practice squad guys down the stretch into the playoffs. I still don't get it. I don't know how it happened.
They drafted Rager, who I didn't like the pick, but I still thought he was going to be like a 700-yard guy. But you were closer. So after four of the 11 categories, we're tied 2-2.
There's no winner here, I don't think.
No, we're both losers. Next category is Jalen Hurts offensive snaps.
Oh, wow.
And it goes along with the last one. Neither of us thought he was going to play much because we both thought Carson was going to be,
I think Jalen Hurts was going to start games unless Carson got hurt. Yeah,
so I picked 56 and you picked 50. And we did these separately, so we didn't know the other ones. But we were both kind of in lockstep there. He ended up at 334. So
yeah, I mean, he would have been around there if he stayed as a gadget player.
Yeah, he was playing about 2 or 3 snaps. So we were on the right track up until the Packers game. The next one we were both right on. Brandon Graham sacks. I said 8.5, and you said 7.5. He had 8.
Oh man, what do we do here?
It's a tie.
Okay.
All right. Next category.
Well, we had 11 events, so we wouldn't tie at the end.
I know. The next category. Next year we'll do a tiebreaker.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll do a tiebreaker. Greg Ward catches. We were pretty close on this one. I had 61. You had 55. He had 53. So you're only off by 2. So after 7 categories, it's 3-3. It's 3-3-1 with 4 to go. The next one, and this one, we were off by the most on this one. Deshaun, 40-yard catches. I said 7. What the hell was I thinking? What is wrong with me? I thought Deshaun was going to have a huge season. I was delusional. I thought he was going to stay healthy. I thought Carson throwing to Deshaun for a full healthy season, this dude's going to have a huge year. You said 4. We were both idiotic, but you were closer. I was twice as idiotic. The next one's hilarious. And we didn't realize, I guess, how much Howie was going to use the practice squad. Usually it's just a place where you keep developmental guys, but
this year the rules were all wacky.
Yeah, they used it as kind of an extension of the roster, which was smart. The question was, how many practice squad players will be on the 53? Guys who were on the practice squad from the moment the roster was set, not like Cravon LeBlanc, who was on the practice squad 3 years ago, but how many 2020 practice squad players will play a game for the Eagles in 2020? I said 14. You said 7. It was 23.
Yeah.
I'll tell you who they were. Graylin Arnold, Jamone Brown, Deontay Burnett, Hakeem Butler, Blake Countess, Jason Kroom, Travis Fulgham, Elijah Holyfield, Jamison Houston, Jordan Howard, Jason Huntley, Michael Jacquette, Luke Jariga, Adrian Killens, T.Y. McGill, Joe Osmond, Elijah Riley, Kevon Seymour, Rashad Smith. Prince Tega played a game, which I had no memory of, played in the last game. Raekwon Williams, Trevor Williams, and Caleb Wilson. And only 7 guys on the practice squad never played in a game.
That's what I was actually guessing. That was my 7. I nailed that. I misunderstood it, and I thought you meant how many practice squad guys will not play.
And of those 7, one of them had a head coaching interview. So those 7 were Jordan Franks, Lavert Hill, Matt Leo, Josh McCown, Dante Olson, Casey Tucker, and Mike Warren on the running back. And Josh McCown goes from the Eagles practice squad to the Texans active roster to interviewing for the Texans job that goes to David Culley. So kind of a strange year for Josh, but really it's amazing. I mean, 23 guys played got on the field who were on the practice squad. So
yeah, I thought, the Eagles didn't do a lot well in 2020, but they managed that situation pretty well, realizing how to manipulate the call-ups. Like T.Y. McGill, it was so funny because I should have figured out this loophole, but T.Y. McGill they'd used up his 2 elevations. So you had 2 elevations from the practice squad to get a guy to play, but then you had COVID-19 replacements. So they would get like one guy on COVID-19. And I think they called up T.Y. McGill like 6 times, whereas he was only supposed to have 2 elevations.
Yeah. Yeah. So they out-practice squatted the entire NFL.
The parade's on Tuesday.
Yeah. All right. So 2 categories left, and we are tied 4-4-1. Fletcher Cox sacks. I picked 7.5. You picked 10. He had 6.5. So I get the nod there. So it comes down to Nelson Aguilar catches for the Raiders.
Oh, man.
We put that in kind of like, all right, let's have one really kind of off the wall one here.
I hope you win this because I hope we're not tied.
I picked 12.
Oh, no.
You said 27. Nelly wins. You win with Nelly. It finishes 5-5-1, and we are tied again.
So all of our efforts to break a tie didn't work.
Nelly had a good year. It's going to be interesting to see how much money he gets as a free agent.
He should make some money. I mean, I give him credit because he didn't just get a veteran salary. He got the Raiders took the veteran salary benefit deal, which basically means like we pay you the minimum, but you don't even count that much to our cap hit, which is also the reason they couldn't extend him during the year.
Right. The league put this thing into it was basically to get older, like a lot of older players, not older, but like guys who had higher minimums weren't getting signed because like the minimum wage, if you've been in the league long enough, goes up to like what, $9.85 or something. Mm-hmm. So it allows a team to sign a guy at minimum and not count his entire base against. You can't get a bonus with it, mm-hmm. or you get a very small bonus. I think it's a
pre-written bonus. It's like $250 or something like that.
It's
maybe less than that.
So Nelly was, as low paid as anybody with that experience in the NFL could be. And he goes out and has 900 yards and 8 touchdowns, averaged 19 yards a catch. So yeah, he's only, what is he, 27? He's 27.
Yeah, he's 6 years in now.
Yeah.
He was young when he got to the NFL.
Yeah, he's going to get some money.
Yeah, good for him.
Yeah, absolutely. He bet on himself. You always root for guys that bet on themselves.
I don't think he had a choice. I don't think there are other teams really offering him money last year. So
that's a fair point. That's true. So we'll do it again next year, and we'll have to add a tiebreaker.
We already did that. We'll have to add a bunch of tiebreakers. Like
whoever's closest to like how many snaps the Eagles have. We'll have like a tiebreaker category. A
tiebreaker. Yeah,
not just.
It's like those, like in, a website has those security questions, but they have like 5 of them.
Yeah.
Like what was the color of your first car? We'll just keep going through those.
Or we could just do those kind of questions.
Yeah, sure. Who cares? That was funny though, to hear some of those numbers.
What was your first car?
My first car?
Yeah.
It was it was my dad's car, and then I took it over. It was a white Buick Regal.
Wow.
That thing though, horsepower, like that thing flew. It was way too fast for me to be my first car. And it looked like an old man car, but hasn't got
I had a Buick Centurion. I worked in Maine for a summer, and we had no money. I worked with a guy. I put out a little tourist newspaper in Agunquit, Maine, and we needed a car because we printed the paper down in Boston at the Harvard Crimson, actually at their printing press. So we would have to put the paper together to make it, like we had X-Actos and border tape and wax and all that. We actually put the pages together at the Harvard. So we needed a car, and we found this Buick Centurion, which is like larger than like a battleship and heavier. Those old Buicks, and it was like a 78 Buick Centurion, and we would drive back to Maine on 95 going like 105, and like the thing wouldn't even rattle. I mean, it was a tank. And I think that was actually, I had a little Honda Civic I got from my mom when she stopped driving it. But I think that Buick is my first actual car. I forgot about that one. We both had Buicks.
That's funny. And you can say you went to Harvard. So Rube, Alex Smith gets cut from Washington. Obvious connection here to Philly. I don't know if it will be a landing spot for him or if the Eagles would even be interested, but the connection, of course, is he was once college teammates with the Eagles quarterbacks coach. Yeah.
It makes sense. I mean, he proved that he's healthy enough to play, and what he's been through is unbelievable. He played pretty well. He didn't play bad when he played. I wouldn't think he'd be getting a huge salary from anybody at this point in his career. It does make some sense. I mean, they have to figure out exactly what they want at that position. If they decide to go with Jalen Hurts as the starter, or a rookie, if they're set on that, you want a backup who's come to terms with being a backup. You don't want Jeff Garcia, who's that kind of mentality, who's like, I mean, you want a guy that wants to start, but somebody who's going to accept that they're the backup. And I think Alex Smith at this point in his career is probably at that point. So it does make sense. He's healthy enough. He can still play. He's not going to cost you. There's a connection there. It's a guy that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think there are like tiers of the backup quarterback, right? And there are some guys who are like borderline starter caliber players. And then there are guys like Alex Smith, who I don't think is a starter right now. I don't think anyone thinks he's a starter, but I don't know how, when you look at like the list of those guys, whether it's Alex Smith or Andy Dalton or Tyrod Taylor, Jacoby Brissett, is there one guy who really kind of stands out to you?
To me, Tyrod. I think he's.
And we can mention Ryan Fitzpatrick too, possible.
Yeah. I mean, he's probably the most talented out of that group. I like Tyrod. I think he makes the most sense. I think he's a borderline starter, but I think he's a guy that understands his role and accepts his role. But he's also a guy who can go in and win you a couple games and play well. Ryan Fitz is interesting because he always seems to find a starting job, somewhere. I think he came in the same year as Alex Smith, right? 2005. He's 38. Played well last year. All those guys make some sense. To me, Tyrod's, he's a little younger. I mean, with quarterbacks, you never know. So much of it is the system and the people around you. Their play doesn't really decline with age. It maybe a little bit, but it declines with situation and who's around you. I think Tyrod makes the most sense. I would take Ryan Fitz. He might be looking for a starting job. There's so much movement. It's hard to gauge this right now because so many teams, so many quarterbacks want to change teams. It's unprecedented.
It's such a weird offseason with quarterbacks. And I wonder if some of the bigger names have to move first before the lesser quarterbacks.
That's what I'm thinking.
But, I mean, there are some intriguing options. Even Andy Dalton coming off last year, he can still play a little bit. And Jacoby Brissett knows the system. Like, if you want that familiarity and you think not only can he be an adequate backup and winning you a couple games if your starter goes out, but he can also help a young quarterback, whether it's Jalen Hurts or or a draft pick. He can help them kind of learn the system. Oh, there are intriguing options out there.
Brissett played well that 1 year. He started 2 years ago with the Colts. He had 18 touchdowns and 6 interceptions, completed 61% of his passes. Obviously, if you have a chance to get Phillip Rivers, you do it. But he can play. He's all right. He's pretty good. How old is Jacoby Brissett? Let's check this out.
Probably 27.
Yeah, 28. So,
yeah.
And he went to Florida. I don't think he finished at Florida, but anybody who went to Florida has an advantage because Howie's a big Florida guy.
That's not really true anymore.
That's why they're drafting Kyle Pitts.
Chris Sims, we had him on our last podcast, and he teased his draft quarterback rankings, and they've been unveiled. And this is my favorite part of every offseason. And first, let me say, I know Chris Sims isn't always the most popular guy, but he's right a lot. I mean, he's especially with quarterbacks. It's funny. Every year he puts out his quarterback rankings in the draft, and everyone accuses him of clickbait or that he's trying to stir the pot. And every year he's right, or just about every year he's right. So
he liked Mahomes. He loved Mahomes.
Loved Mahomes. Liked Lamar Jackson a few years ago. Last year was higher on Herbert than Tua. I mean, like, we're talking about the last 5 or 6 years. He's pretty much nailed everything. So.
And what I like about Chris is that he always, I mean, and he bases this on film. He's watching film and evaluating these guys. He's not, he doesn't follow the, the conventional wisdom, and sometimes he's wrong. But I like the way he does it. You want to go through these real quick? Yeah,
there's no group think, and it was funny. I hate this knock on former players, and it's like he sucked in the NFL. But it's like, I didn't play in the NFL, and you're listening to me. Like, this guy actually knows what he's talking about. He played in the league. He played in the league. He's been around football his whole life. He knows what he's talking about. And I don't know if I necessarily agree with all this, but here are his rankings. The biggest surprise is right at the top. He has Zach Wilson as the number 1 guy. He's the first person I've seen not have Trevor Lawrence in that spot. And doesn't matter. We know Trevor Lawrence is going to the Jaguars. I haven't been shy about that, but he has Zach Wilson 1, Trevor Lawrence 2, and he's made it very clear that Chris Sims says he likes Trevor Lawrence. He likes Trevor Lawrence a lot. He just really loves Zach Wilson. He has Mac Jones at 3. This is where it gets kind of surprising. At number 4, he has Kellen Mond from Texas A&M. At 5, Justin Fields. 6, Trey Lance. Make of that what you will, but he has a track record, and when he talks about draft quarterbacks, you have to listen.
Yeah, and I think Mac Jones is a guy that I think he's gonna. I like the fact that he likes Mac Jones. I think he's gonna end up. I don't know if he'll be the best of this bunch, but I think he's gonna be up there. But yeah, I think the Trey Lance thing is interesting because he's a guy that, for obvious reasons, the Eagles have been associated with. I don't know how much is just speculation and how much he's the kind of guy that you could see the Eagles being enamored of, and maybe a little element of, we're going to draft a North Dakota State guy and get it right this time, or, almost a revenge pick. We'll show Carson. That's not how you build a team. But I'm sure if they believe he's the best quarterback in there and they decide to want to draft a quarterback and they take him, and they might even be able to trade down to get him, a few spots.
Maybe.
But, we'll have to get closer to the draft to know that. But, just kind of see where all the quarterbacks end up. But I'm as soon as they traded Carson, as soon as obviously we're going to trade Carson, I kept thinking they're going to draft Trey Lance. I just know it. But, yeah.
He's a good player. He needs work, though. That's the problem with trying to project some of these guys. Yeah.
He's played so little. I watched him. We were on a road trip in 2019. I forget where we were, but I was in my hotel before we all went out to dinner, and they were showing the 1AA or whatever they call that now, the playoffs and North Dakota. What is it?
FCS.
Yeah, Fading Captain Series, and they were showing that they had the game on North Dakota State, and I'm watching this kid. I'm like, he's like the best quarterback I've ever seen. I mean, it was, you have to take into account level of competition. And, but I mean, the plays he was making, the throws he was making, it was, I just couldn't believe it. I didn't really know much about him before then, but he was on my radar after that. And I think he's one of those, high ceiling, really low floor type guys. I think he could, that'd be a risky pick for anybody, but you might get something special there.
Yeah. And it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with the Jets, because we all know what the Jaguars are doing. They're taking Trevor Lawrence, and they're not going to think twice about it. But the kind of talk out of New York and some of the reports about them maybe wanting to stick with Sam Darnold, when we started to hear that a few weeks ago, it kind of set off alarms. Like, it sounds like that pick is for sale. And I don't know if that's the case. Maybe they'll look at Zach Wilson and think, no, that's our guy, we got to take him. Or maybe they'll love Fields or whoever it is. But didn't it make it seem like that? Once you start hearing that, like, maybe they'll stick with the quarterback they have. And this was pretty soon after the season ended. Like, hey, maybe they'll stick with Sam Darnold. All of a sudden you go, that number 2 pick might be for sale. And if another team falls in love with Zach Wilson, it could kind of shake up the whole draft.
It's true. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of gamesmanship going on right now, a lot of unknowns. I guess once, we get through March and maybe some of these veteran quarterbacks settle, after trades, we'll have a better idea what teams want to do. I mean, I think Miami's a big question mark. I mean, it's hard to imagine they would go quarterback, but, you hear whispers about it. So who knows? So much of it is just, gamesmanship, stuff flying around. This is going to be a great player for the Eagles. What do you think? Do you think they're going to go QB? I'm really leaning not now, but I go back and forth.
I thought the last time you said you're really – we just did a pod like earlier this week, and I asked you, said they're taking a quarterback.
It was last week I was convinced of it, but it just doesn't make sense. Because if you take a weapon, whoever it is, whether it's, one of the receivers or Kyle Pitts or whoever it is, if you take a weapon for Jalen and put him in that position and he fails, you still have that weapon for the quarterback you draft next year. You still have that guy. So, but, if you're in love with one of these guys and next year's quarterback crop isn't, supposedly isn't as good, or who knows, I could see it, but I don't know. I just think it makes the most sense, and we're off topic here, but I just think it makes the most sense to give Jalen 2021. That's what I would do.
Yeah, I mean, I've that's what I think. Like, that's what I would do too. But
what do you think they're going to do?
I think they're going to do that, but I don't know how they're evaluating this class right now. I know they're in their evaluation process, so I think there is a chance they fall in love with one of these quarterbacks. If they're not sold on Jalen Hurts, and we've said this a million times, they're going to look at these guys and they're going to figure out if one of them they think is a lot better. And if one of them's a lot better or has a much higher ceiling, then yeah, it's definitely in play.
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. And just if they do that, it makes the Hurts pick look even worse.
I agree, but I also don't think that's a reason to not do it.
That's true.
I mean, if you can't worry about perception of a pick from last year, if you love one of the quarterbacks, you got to take them. That's the way I look at it. And if you're not in love with Jalen Hurts, but that's not what I would do. I
mean, I think Kyler Murray is a perfect example of that. If you fall in love with that guy, you take him, and they did. And
then everyone forgets about the other guy. Everyone forgets what you did.
Right. If he's
and that was a first round pick.
Yeah, he was. That's fair. That's a fair point. You better be right though with that evaluation.
That's for damn sure. And I mean, no matter what, you better be right with your evaluation. This is a valuable pick, and you can't afford to screw it up.
When's the last top 10 pick that they really screwed up? I guess Carson. No, I guess it would be Michael Haddix. They had a stretch there. They didn't do so well, but They're going to get a really good. They're going to get somebody who should be a really good player at 6. I mean,
and if they're not sold on a quarterback, I think there is a really good chance there's a run on them, especially if the Jets trade that pick. I mean, I think you could see 4 quarterbacks in the first 5 picks.
You really?
I think that's a real possibility. Quarterbacks always get pushed up the board. Always get pushed up the board. Always get taken before they should get taken. And if you're the Eagles and you decide we're not in on one of these guys, just let it happen. Let it happen, and even be willing to trade down depending on how the board's falling. You know, if there's a team that wants to jump up and take a quarterback at 6, listen, because if they end up in that spot and they go, these quarterbacks aren't for us, by all means, everyone get up there and take your quarterback. Let all those great players start to fall. You know.
That would be an ideal scenario if they're committed to not taking a quarterback, and there's a run on quarterbacks early, and they can get out of 6, get a pick, get to 9 or 10, and get the weapon that they coveted in the first place.
That's the best case scenario if that's the way it goes. You mentioned the Carson Wentz. Go ahead.
I was going to say Howie's on his way to another executive of the year.
I think that might be a while. It's funny because
Sims is voting, man.
He's more bullish on Howie than we are. That's another thing. People say he hates Philly. He loves Howie.
He does.
You know,
he does, and he's coming at it from a different perspective. You know, he's coming at it from the perspective of this guy. Just, a few years ago, he built a Super Bowl team. He built, 3 straight playoff teams. Every team has that 4-11-1 type of season, and he's going to build another. Now, I don't see it that way. Most people in the city don't, but it's good to have that perspective, outsider perspective sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. Carson Wentz, and you mentioned the draft pick of him, and it's still, to me, honestly, it's still surreal that we're here. And we talked about those projections for him before the year. I had a chance to catch up with his brother, Zach Wentz, on Wednesday. We talked about the AO1 Foundation chart, Carson's foundation. It's going to stay here in some ways going into the future here. It's just, but after I talked to him, and the story is up now on NBCSportsPhiladelphia.com, but I started to think about what's Carson Wentz's legacy gonna be here in Philly? That'll be part of it, I guess, if the food truck stays here. They've done a lot of good in the community, but I don't know. When we talk, when you hear the name Carson Wentz in 10, 15 years, and maybe he'll change some of it on his own if he has success or failure elsewhere, but just his time in Philly, how do you think he's going to be remembered here?
I think a lot of the answer to that question is going to depend on how he plays with the Colts. And because I think if he goes on and has a great career with the Colts, makes the playoffs, plays well, deep playoff runs, a couple more Pro Bowls, people are going to look at his career here as the Eagles screwed up. And Carson was a great player. But if he doesn't, it's going to be, wow, he really, he was terrible at the end. And I think it'll be one of unfulfilled, expectations. But I really think a lot of it's going to depend on what happens from here on out, because the perception is going to change, So I think of him I think of it mainly unfulfilled promise. I thought he was going to be a perennial Pro Bowl type guy here. It didn't happen. Even after the 2019 season, I still felt that way. Ultimately disappointing. And I think, a lot of the stuff we've learned about him, and I mean, I like the guy. He's a good guy. I think that the AO1 stuff and the fact that he wants to keep part of that in Philadelphia, which he doesn't have to do that. And, I think a lot of people would be so petty to be like, they ran me out of this town. I'm taking my food truck with me to Indy. But he really cares about the community, and he's done a lot of good work here, and he wants to continue that. And that's big. But I think you can be a good guy and still have, issues as far as leadership and just locker room presence. And it almost seemed like he just never clicked in those ways that you have to as a quarterback. And I'll look at him as just disappointing. And, the injuries aren't really his fault, but you know, I'll just look at it. Unfulfilled promise is how I'll look at his legacy.
Yeah. And I think that won't change. I don't think, I don't think that changes depending on how he plays in Indy or wherever else he ends up going. I think we're always going to look back at like they had it, like they had something and they lost it. And it's funny because I was talking to Zach Wentz about, and it didn't make the story, but we were talking about the charity softball games. He only ended up having 2 of them. They were supposed to have one last year and then COVID, obviously. But I think, and this, I don't know if this is right or not, but I think his first charity softball game, it was June 1st, 2018. You can argue that was like the peak Carson Wentz being the franchise quarterback in Philly, because no, he wasn't on the field in the Super Bowl, but they still had that Super Bowl afterglow. It's June. It's not that far removed from the parade, right? He has all his teammates, all his Super Bowl winning teammates at that game. An incredible turnout from the fans. There was no question that he was still the franchise. Like Nick Foles was at the game, it was just, there was no sense that things were going to turn badly, right? And it was like, he's the guy. And the franchise quarterback means more than being the guy on the field. Like you're the face of the franchise, and he embraced that. He has like the city embraced him. And I look back, like that was the peak. That's what we thought he was going to have here in this city for 10, 15 years. And 3 years later for it to all be shattered it's mind blowing to me.
Yeah. It happened so quickly. And I mean, 6 months ago, nobody could have foreseen any of this. I do think that, when I look back at his career here, I'll words like uncoachable or difficult to coach, you can't help think about that stuff. That I think a lot of this, I think a lot went into the relationship fracturing, Howie not getting him the help that he needed at wide receiver, Doug's play calling, and Doug had a tough year. Obviously, the relationship there were fissures, and I think Doug had a lot to do with that, or had something to do with it. But I think Carson. So I think there's blame everywhere. Obviously, Carson was difficult to coach for whatever reasons. Some of them might be understandable. He's like, well, I'm getting these terrible plays sent in. I'm going to audible out of everything. But I think it took everybody in the organization, all the important people, Carson, Howie, even Lurie and Doug, to ruin this, to wreck this. So they could have done more to make it work. He could have done more to make it work. When things go bad, sometimes it just starts spiraling, and there's no way to fix it. But it's kind of unprecedented just how quickly and decisively it fell apart. And I just think, I don't think people are going to look at 2017 when they look at his legacy here. I think maybe in time, I mean, like you've always said, they don't win the Super Bowl without him going 11-2, because Nick isn't going 11.
Point blank, they don't win without him.
They don't win without him. They don't win the Super Bowl if Carson doesn't play like the MVP for 13 games. And I hope people remember that, but I don't think they will. I mean, I think that'll kind of be secondary to just how it fell apart and his role in it. And it's weird, though. It's such a divisive question, and there's two extremes. There's not a lot of people in the middle. It's either they completely screwed up by not making it work, or they had no chance to make it work. They had to get rid of him. I don't know if we'll ever know all the answers.
Yeah, but you're right. I mean, I think his play in Indy will determine a lot of the way he's viewed here, fair or not fair. All right. If you enjoy the Eagle Eye Podcast, do us a favor. Please rate and subscribe wherever you get your pods. If you're watching on YouTube, please click like and subscribe there as well. We'll be back with you again next week as the Eagles kind of gear up for the beginning of free agency. For Reuben, I'm Dave. We'll talk to you soon.